Greetings, programs. I am Sark. Welcome to the grid. Today's game is Spline Tools in 3D Studio Max 2020. Just going to go over some of the two-dimensional geometry available. When working with lines, it's often preferable to be working in an orthographic view, so I'm going to go ahead and blow up the front view. That's Alt-W. And I got my line tool here under Create, Two-Dimensional Shapes, Line. When you are creating a line and you left-click, you'll notice that it expects you to continue contiguously, right? So if I continue clicking, you see I get these corners. If I'm happy with my shape and I right-click, I can stop working on it. And there are ways to add more to it or to go in and refine it afterwards. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Another thing that can happen is maybe you're clicking your shape and you get frustrated and you don't know how to stop. And that's not really a problem either. I'm just middle clicking and dragging to give myself some more canvas here. We can fix that too. Other thing you'll notice is that you have a creation method. You have an initial type, corner is what mine's set to, and a drag type. So if I just click corners, I get corners. But if I click and drag, I get this S-curve, this Bezier curve. So that can be very helpful if you want to make something more natural looking. Smooth is kind of a half step, right? So all of these points can be changed after the fact. So if you select any of your lines and you right-click on it and you choose Convert to Editable Spline, you now have three selection modes: vertices, segments, and splines. These are kind of comparable to vertices in your editable geometry, your editable mesh mode. You have edges, right? Segments, they call them, but these are comparable to your edges. And then you have like the whole thing, right? So if you could attach a couple together, but really, mostly you're going to work with the vertices. So let's go ahead and change this one. Let's say I wanted to make this one smooth. No big deal. Let's say I didn't like where it was placed. You just get your move tool with W, move it. Let's say I prefer this one be a Bezier, no problem. Then I can move these handles. The trick with these handles is if you've like clicked on this X arrow and then you go to move your handles, you'll notice you can't move them up and down. You can only move them left and right. But if you click in between and then move your handles, they should move as desired. If I really wanted more line, I could go in and refine, and I could just add a few points and then pull these out. I could choose Create Line. And now these are two parts of the same line, right? So I can select this one or this one. To connect them, you've got to get the verts on top of each other. Sometimes it's a little tricky. I find an easy way is to select vertex mode. Select one and go to not that, fuse, right? You can actually select two that are very close to each other and just press fuse, and they'll find the average location between them. Now they're not connected yet, right? So once you've got them fused, you can take them both and you can select them and hit weld, and that'll make them into one point. Now it happens to have welded them with this Bezier corner, but that's an easy change too if you don't care for it. So that's how to change your vertices into different behaviors. If you've got too much line and you really wish you had quit clicking because you'd done such a nice job up to that point, no big deal. Just go into segments, delete the segments you don't care for, and then, if you want, just refine and add a few extra points at the end, and change your mind about what you were going to do with them. That's no problem. All right? You can then use those. You're like, oh yeah, I really wish I had a nice smooth turn here. No problem. Okay. So one thing that you'll see is if you have a curve that's really extreme, there we go. I think I kind of made one. You start to your curve's not as smooth. So there's a couple ways of dealing with that. One is that you can go to interpolation and you can say, you know what, I really need like 12 steps for each of these segments, and that'll smooth it out. But that's a little more expensive, especially if you're going to convert this to geometry at some point. Another way is just to drop another refinement in. You can be like, you know what, this curve is complex enough, it deserves another waypoint. Oh. and then maybe you've got to think about how it is, but that can help. Maybe even two, if it's really extreme. It's mostly what's happening up here that's throwing it so much, but yeah. So that can alleviate the need to make every single segment in your line. Maybe you have some straight segments that are not that complicated. Maybe they don't all need 12 steps of interpolation. This adaptive mode, I probably ought to look into that. I bet that adjusts according. Yeah, look at that. So maybe forget everything I said and just use the adaptive mode, although I haven't looked into it, so I don't know what its quirks or foibles are. Okay. What else? Well, these are really useful, as you saw earlier, in making like limbs or fingers or something like that. I also like to use the spline tools to create cups and bowls and, I don't know, mugs and wine glasses, things like anything that's symmetrical all the way around. And there's a couple easy tricks for this. Let's just say I'm making some kind of chalice or something, who knows. You've got to draw an outside line and an inside line if you're going to do an object that is concave, right? So I don't like the way I've drawn my line. I want to adjust it. I'm going to go to vertex. I'm going to take these down. That feels a little more okay. I'm going to take each of the ones on the end and just make sure it's centered up on the x-axis. All right. Let's pretend I were happy with that. Probably needs a refinement, right? We're just talking about that. Okay. Good enough. So to create a three-dimensional shape from this, all we have to do is go into our modify panel and choose lathe and choose min. As long as I drew on the right side of the central axis, then min is what I want. If I was drawing on the other side, I wanted max, right? So now I have a bell instead of a cup. But I want this cup. So you can see there's a 3D shape. You can change how many sides it has. It could be down to 4 sides or 3 sides. It could be up to 16 or more, depending on, you know, how smooth you need this to be. 32 might do it for all practical purposes. Sometimes you get this funny stuff going on. Usually weld core fixes it. If weld core doesn't fix it, it just means that your lathe's a little off. Your axis on your lathe, for whatever reason, maybe the pivot point in your object wasn't set up quite right. Then you end up with like a hole. And a quick fix is just to grab the axis and move it. It's not ideal. It's hard to get it dead on. Unless you know that it should be 0, right? Because the advantage of having lined up on 0. So that's pretty good. So that's the line tools. That's lathing. There are a lot of two-dimensional tools in 3ds Max that are very useful. Text is another one. You can take text and then convert it to editable poly even, and then like extrude it and stuff. So there's even tools built into the text for doing this right in that menu. But yeah, that can be a helpful tool as well. All right, that's it for today. Good luck, have fun, stay safe.